Today we're going to talk about this bike. Obviously, the first thing you want to check is to check your bank account first. If your bank account maybe has 5 digits, you will need to scrap the bike. Then you'll buy a bike, so you don't need to do any more periodic checks. You only have to rely on warranty, and that's it. So end of interview.
Hello everyone, I'm here at Scooter Narcotics and this is Mark. I've been sending my scooter here for the past 4 years for my servicings and repair. And as you know, I'm going for another long trip again. And here I am with the scooter. I'll be letting him take charge of my scooter to make sure that it's ready for the long ride. So Mark, can you introduce yourself and what you do here?
I spearhead the technical department here for the past 10 years, but I was alone. Until now we have like 3 or 4 staffs. So we mainly focus on aesthetics, modifications, and also repairs most of the time for Vespas and or other kinds of automatic scooters lah. So that is why you're here today.
Yes. Yeah, so it's important to make sure that your scooter is checked before you leave for a long trip. Okay, Mark, this question has been asked many times. Before setting out on a long trip with your motorcycle or any other vehicles, what are the things that you need to check or replace before doing so?
Okay, the number one thing that I will always advise my customers and also my friends, and this is a ritual also for me. Before I embark, even on a short trip or even on a long trip, I always have to make sure that I have my owner's manual. This owner's manual is very important because it tells you what needs to be done, all the intervals, the periodic checks and maintenance guide is all there. With this, it can save you lots of time and lots of money because you know exactly what to change and you know exactly when to change it, and you won't miss the intervals, or better so, you won't change stuff much earlier than what people used to. So I think this is important, the owner's manual.
One of the things when embarking on any long trip or even in your daily commuting or just the entire journey of owning a vehicle, I think it's very important to take ownership of your own vehicle's servicings.
History.
Yeah, history. And this is one of the mistakes that I made while on the road the previous time. I was relying a lot on mechanics expertise to tell me what is wrong with it. But the thing is, if you are going to travel for a long run, you're going to visit different countries and visiting different mechanics. And the thing is, every mechanics that you visit, they do not have a record of the servicing or repair history. Therefore, it's very important that you have the record of what is changed, what is being done to your scooter at every repair. I mean, you don't have to know how to do things, but at least you need to know what is done so that you can relay the information to the next mechanic. Yes,
I agree with you because even if you did follow all the service intervals from the service manual, when you go to a new place, especially, for example, if you service your bike in Singapore and then you're going to go on a long trip and then you end up in Malaysia and then you need an oil change, or if you end up in any other countries you need an oil change, the number one rule for me is to always have pre-planning. So always calculate your distance from Singapore maybe to Thailand, how many kilometers will you be covering. But of course there are instances where we will meet obstacles while we're traveling. Maybe your tire punctured, maybe there could be a coolant leakage, maybe there could be a ruptured hole somewhere, maybe your fuel is leaking from other parts of the bike. I would say that a periodic check or maintenance will reduce the risk of these things. But if you do your due diligence, even after the mechanic has done his work, always check what he has done and always check what has been serviced so that it will prevent any kind of mishaps during your travel.
Yeah, so don't always 100% rely on the mechanic. You need to do your due diligence to make sure that the job is done right as well.
It works both ways.
Yeah.
I think that you have the responsibility lah. That means you need to know what you paid for. Then you need to observe what the mechanic has done. You also need to know like when is the best time to come back or go to another place or even if you need to order spare parts and get ready for your trip. I think that's important. Yeah. It's very important to have feedbacks and communication with your mechanic and people that you actually trust doing your bike. So you can't always say that when a mechanic does the bike, it will be 100% okay, it will be 100% ready for a road trip. But you also have to have a little bit of responsibility to understand what has been replaced and what needs to be checked on your own with your very own eyes, and make sure that whatever that has been replaced and whatever that has been fixed is reinforced properly, or is being screwed on properly, is being bolted up properly, and making sure that there won't be any other mishaps during your travel. I think that's very important. Sometimes as mechanics, you give me details like, hey bro, well, I'm going for 20,000, 30,000 kilometers, no. Are you sure I can, you know, ride this thing that far? So with that information that I have, that's why I say feedback and communication very important. So if you tell me that, hey bro, I'm going 40,000 kilometers, and I'll say, okay, let's change the cylinder, let's change the valves, let's change the cylinder head. So at least you have a peace of mind when you travel. I think that is very important. So what are usually the things I check? There are 3 simple elements. Let me break it down to you. It's normally water, fire and air. Okay, it's not very difficult. So first is water. Water always have to make sure that your coolant reservoir has enough coolant, obviously, so that there won't be any overheating, right? And your mechanics should also check that the coolant reservoir inside should not have any forms of vacuum after a coolant flush. Because when there is a vacuum, your coolant will not be able to circulate around the engine, and you will then have overheating issue. So having coolant also does not mean that you are safe from all the trouble. Okay, so secondly is a fire. Fire, that can be, it's very obvious stuff. Your fuel hose, okay, and your battery. Your battery has to be charging. When you go on a long trip, you got to make sure that your battery always recharge. The voltage has got to be between 12.8 to 13.5. It's good to also have a voltmeter. But if you have a voltmeter, it will also save you a lot of trouble, okay? And then air. What is air? Obvious. It's the tires. The tires, you must always check the tire expiry, and then check the tire hardness, and then check whether these tires is appropriate for the terrains that you are going to travel on.
Very interesting to break it down into the elements of Earth. Okay, I also get this question a lot. What are the spare parts that I should bring with me along the trip?
How far is your travel?
I guess around 10,000 kilometers.
So 10,000 kilometers, I think that will probably be past the border, past Malaysia also. Yes. You could probably end up in where?
I could end up in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam.
Okay, so that boils back to the number 1 part of the video, is always pre-planning. You always need to know where you are going, and whether, I think this is one good tip I can give everyone. If you are riding a Vespa, or you can be riding a Kimco, or you can be riding a Yamaha, you must always check whether there is an authorized distributor in the particular country, or whether the routes where you are planning to go would pass by some of these places. But I think 10,000 kilometers is not very far. To me, it's okay, because that's equivalent to probably 3 servicing, 3 oil change. Pre-planning is important, like I said, because before you set off on your journey, you would have then checked what needs to be replaced and what not needs to be replaced. So if I was doing my pre-servicing before going on a trip, I will then know that when my next interval will be. So the most important part is that, Juvina, we have to go back to the owner's manual again. So this owner manual will actually tell you what to replace, what to check, and basically what to adjust during a specific time or specific mileage. So this is always very important.
Okay, regarding spare parts, right? Especially if you are going on a long haul, I would usually bring spares for what I consider is the weakest link, like things that would break very easily. If you have owned a vehicle for a long time, you know what are the very common things that will spoil, and I'll bring spares of that. So for the example of my 2-stroke scooter, I know spark plugs get fouled very easily. The throttle cable and clutch cable, sometimes they do snap. and my lever as well. Sometimes if I fall down, yeah, I will break the lever. So I will bring spare of that, and those items are very small, so I don't mind carrying them because these are essential and they can break easily. But for other things like, you know, piston and engine block, no way, I will never carry those again. I would rather have it shipped.
I think you have a very good point over here because your travels, you obviously travel a lot more than most of us. And these are circumstances where we hardly meet, like a broken lever. I think that's a bit hard to imagine lah. But it's good that you put all these things in your bag before you went on a trip. And I think that yeah, although they may hold very little weight on your Vespa, on your bag, right? Again, these are things that we will never imagine. But then again, I mean, if you are not in a third world country, and if the internet accessibility is good, and of course, if courier services is good, you can always order parts these days, and it'll get to you in like maybe 1 to 3 days time, probably. So you probably need to spend extra in a hotel lah, to stay there and, you know, have someone to get your bike repaired. For parts, like I said, pre-planning is important. You can't possibly like, okay, if you tell me you're going on a 10,000 kilometer trip, there's no way you're just going to tell me, hey, I'm going to bring a clutch with me lah, huh? But if you have done your pre-servicing and you have observed that the mechanic has done his job and the clutch pads are still thick, then you know what, for the next 10,000 you don't need to bring a clutch. Unless there could be some mishap, or unless there could be some issues with installation that could jeopardize your journey, right? So it's a two-way street. You got to trust the mechanic, and you got to also observe what the mechanic does, and you got to also observe and tell him what he probably has not done correctly. But try not to rely 100% on the mechanic, but do some due diligence also at times. I'm not trying to tell you not to trust the mechanic, but be observant, okay? Be observant. So obviously, some parts, universal parts that you can bring, like maybe coolant hoses, you can bring those ring clips. Ring clips are also important, and it's also important to bring additional coolant if it's a liquid cool engine. So you may not know you're leaking coolant somewhere. So, and then the next thing you know, the gas station is probably like, walao eh, 10-20 kilometers away from you. So by the time you reach the gas station without a coolant, or maybe you can use distilled water. So to prevent overheating, always have a spare, you know, coolant or distilled water with you. I think that makes sense. But of course, for all travelers, especially for myself as a traveler, I will want to carry as little things as I can lah. Cost, weight reduction, better fuel efficiency, right? Like you have lesser weight on the bike. So pre-planning is important. You might as well say bring another spare bike with you, right? If you want to go on a long trip. So we don't want that to happen.
One of the items that I would never ever bring again on my trip again is a spare piston and cylinder. Actually, I didn't pack that in, but it was gifted to me along the way when I was doing repair. And I feel a bit paiseh not to take it in lah, but I took it. But in the end, it was really a additional weight that kind of it was a pain to carry for me until when I really need it. So I would rather have it shipped to me at where I am than to carry for them.
Do you overhaul your engine before you go for your long trip?
No,
so,
I overhaul it in Bangkok. Okay, besides spare parts, what are the other things that you think will be useful during a trip?
Well, that's a good question. I will bring duct tapes and cable ties. They are very important. And you will never know when you need them, because sometimes you can have a minor accident, you can have some small little parts that are falling off from the bike, and duct tapes are very important to put things together, and they are very strong. So try to buy good quality duct tapes. And obviously, cable ties are not expensive. Cable ties can also reinforce certain parts of a bike when during an emergency. So these are two things that I will prioritize when I go on a trip. Let's just say, I mean, I've been servicing your bike for the past 4 years. So you probably come to me whenever there's any problems or whatsoever. So there's some kind of like a trust over there. So I think it may get uncomfortable when you go to another country and then with another mechanic that you are not familiar with. to touch on things that we have touched before. So it's also better at times that, you know, you do your homework again and then call your previous mechanic to guide you on things that needs to be replaced when you visit someone new. But of course, the mechanic in that country or that new place will be uncomfortable because sometimes they'll have a mentality like, don't tell me what to do. Like,
Yes.
I know what I'm doing. I'm the mechanic. You're not. So I do get that feeling sometimes also from someone else. So I think, yeah, just be observant and have a lot of feedback and communication with your mechanic. I think that's very important lah.
Yeah. A lot of times followers have asked me, what are some of the upgrades you have done to your scooter? But for me, I like to keep everything stocked because of like availability of some of the parts. And also, I mean, I thought that, you know, sometimes aftermarket parts, they may not last as long. Yeah. So I think, what do you think about upgrades on scooter? What's your opinion on that?
This is a very okay. So we are very mischievous people over here. Like, we love upgrades, we love racing. We tinker a lot with all the parts that are presented to us. Whenever there is something new on the catalog, we will just order them in and try to push the limit of the bike lah. My experience with performance parts can be quite subjective. Over here there's only black and white. So it's either you stay stock or you go to the dark side and you push all the way. Obviously we have seen two kinds of customers, but we also have customers that will want like, hey, I want performance parts, but I also want my bikes to last. I'll tell them, no, don't waste your time. Because you can't have the best of both worlds. So my take on performance parts is that there are some parts that you can use as a normal rider, but of course, do your homework. Like, there are certain upgrades that are good for the bike and that will not wear off the engine that quickly. So basic upgrades like clutch, variator, or maybe even a clutch belt is okay. But if there's anything got to do with engines, camshafts, bigger valves, right, that only means that your engine will run at a higher temperature, okay, and higher revolutions. So higher revolutions means your crankshaft work harder, right? When your parts run at a higher temperature, they will wear off faster than a bike that is always cool, right? So heat dissipation is very important and it's very crucial to every component of the bike or scooter. So my take is, depends risk versus reward lah. So you want fast, you can't expect that, hey, want my bike have to do full service so quickly, or want my oil change has to happen so quickly than before. You have to actually compensate in certain ways. You can't just say that, hey, I want good parts, fast bike, but I want longevity. No way, no way.
Yeah, so the point of your trip is, do you want to go fast or do you want your bike to last for a longer time? For me personally, I'm not really into traveling very, very fast. Okay, I want a scooter to run for a long run. Yeah, so I would prefer to keep
longevity.
Yeah, for me it's longevity.
Yeah, longevity, reliability is always important. Of course, there are certain stock parts. The manufacturer could have thought that maybe there could be a better part to replace what they've developed before. So, I mean, don't cancel me. Like, there are certain stock parts of a brand that maybe doesn't perform as much and always have issues. You may have another parts company that does a better job at it. And sometimes it's no harm to just buy the upgrade, right, and put it in and it solves certain problems, rather than always thinking that, hey, why is this always happening, and replacing the same original part with a distributor. You could potentially spend half the amount of money, right, by buying certain aftermarket parts to solve your problem. So not all aftermarket parts are bad, but stock is always good. It's always the safest.
Okay, before I left for my trip, I was a mechanical idiot. I do not know how to do a lot of things myself, but I learned some before I left, and I learned a lot more when I was traveling. And some of these skills, I wished I would have learned it before I left because they are essential. Mark, what do you think are some of the skills that we need to know before we left on a trip? What are the things that we need to learn how to do ourselves?
Wow. Okay. There are a few things. The basic ones, okay. As a rider, your responsibility as a rider, okay? At least try to learn, okay? There could be a nail in your tires. It's very common during a long trip. And to be able to repair your own tire with a tire patch is already quite impressive, but it's not difficult also. We call it tire worm, or in Malay they call it cacing. This is important because when you're able to patch your own tires, you save yourself a lot of trouble also. And running with a flat tire is not funny, it's not safe also. But nowadays, of course, tubeless tires, you could have some air left behind the tire for you to still travel a bit more. But until the next gas station appears, right, that's when you are able to save your own life. Everyone should be able to check their coolant level. But for me, you don't need to check if you already did your checks during your pre-servicing. And it's always important to have proper observation of your temp sensor. Temp sensor very, very important because, for example, your normal operating temp is at 50% bar when you're traveling on a highway. And suddenly the next day or later on when you travel, right, it goes up to 60, 65, 70%. Then that could be an indication that probably something is leaking somewhere, or something there has to be some problem with the heat dissipation of the engine. Jump start, I think that's also important. Jump start is pretty simple, positive, negative. So plus, minus. Nowadays there is these portable batteries that you can jump start a bike. But take note, there are certain portable batteries that could allow you to only crank your bike a few times only. So to not waste your chances, right, you always got to check, why my bike crank but still cannot start, right? But don't keep going. Always maybe lift out your bucket, check any fuel leaking. Sekali is fuel and sekali is not battery, right? It could be other places of the bike that is giving you a start problem. And obviously, you must be able to check your fuse. It's very easy to check fuse. Put it under the light, then you'll see, this fuse is broken. Oh, that's why I cannot start. So fuses are very cheap. You can also put it inside a pocket, small compartments. You can bring everywhere. It can save your life also in terms of, in case of any short circuit.
I think there was one incident where I couldn't start the bike and I realized it was actually the side stand was down.
Yeah, it's very common. So there are days, we have incidents like that. Hey bro, I just serviced my bike at your shop, you cannot start now. Oh shit, then it's the side stand also. So, but this usually happens with the newbie riders. They may not know, and then we'll be like, hey, is the side stand up? They'll be like, oh yeah, there's a side stand sensor. Oh my god. I think what we're trying to cover today is responsibility as a bike owner also.
Okay, another question I often get is, did your bike ever break down? And if it did, what do you do? Yes, my bike broke down quite a few times on the road, but thankfully most of the time it's still able to run on the road until I get to the next mechanic. If I can fix it, I will try to fix it myself. It is something as simple as like a broken clutch cable, I can get it replaced. And of course I'll try to ask for help.
Yeah, but first thing is to not panic because
don't panic.
During a breakdown, when you panic, you can make the situation worse. Because when you know that your bike is already maybe about to break down, or maybe you started losing power for some reason, always stop at a safe place. I know that's what everybody says, but it is very, very important to stop at a safe place, because there were moments in my life where I almost got hit by a truck. And obviously when your bike starts to lose power, try to make full use of the road. Go as wide as possible outside of the road if it's possible, to probably initiate your repairs, and if you are in a safe place, accidents that you can lower the chances of accidents, because sometimes people cannot see, and worse still if it's at night, right, it's a bit scary. So I would advise park at a safe place, then always have a phone with you, then and a charger, just to be able to call someone that you know in the country or whatever. You may not be good at repairing, you may not be good at diagnosing the bike, but having a charged phone and data roaming is important. I think that's the number one thing that I will do. So you can just do a WhatsApp call. I'm at the road now. I can call a mechanic. Why is it like that? Then you can also have video calls if the reception is good enough. Can save you a lot of time, a lot of money also.
Yeah, actually I did a lot of these mistakes during my trip. I remember on my last day of travel, I was riding at night and my throttle cable broke.
Yeah.
And I don't have mobile data.
Oh my god, that's yeah.
And
yeah.
it was like pitch dark. So the first thing I did was push my scooter to the side. So I got it far away from the highway because there was still a lot of vehicles on the road. And one thing I really find it very useful is to have a headlamp,
Yeah.
torch, because your hands has to be free to fix the
Exactly.
things. And then you have no hands to hold the torchlight. So a head torch is I find it very useful. But I wouldn't recommend riding at night in other countries because it's not like Singapore. A lot of times the roads are not well lit and there are animals.
Anyway, you drive so slow. I mean, you ride so slow, you won't gonna hit one lah. You won't hit the animal. That's
I
what
think
I
the
mean.
animal hit me lah, not I hit the animal.
But then again, when you bring a throttle cable, right, you gotta bring the tools that allow you to change the throttle cable. Don't bring a throttle cable and not bringing the necessary tools to replace the throttle cable. That's just a bit no planning lah. So if I was gonna bring like maybe a pair of brake pads, I gotta have the correct size of Allen key or socket bolts to open up the caliper. So with no proper tools, you won't be able to dismantle the parts that you have brought with you in the journey.
There's a few things that I carry with me just to have a peace of mind. One thing is a GPS tracker that can relay messages. So especially when I'm going to places where there is no mobile data coverage, I use this to let my family members know where exactly I am.
Oh, you have a satellite phone?
Yeah, it's not a satellite phone, it's a satellite tracker. But the messaging is only one way. I can send out but I cannot receive.
Oh, but does it show you where you are?
Yes, it shows the receiver where I am. And there are two buttons. One is SOS, which is for life-threatening emergencies.
Right.
And then there's one button is for non-life-threatening emergency. So like, for example, breakdowns.
But isn't that what the new iPhone now offers?
Yes,
Oh.
I think so.
Okay.
So previously
There isn't an
there
iPhone
isn't-
14. Yeah.
there isn't
So
iPhone
now,
14,
yeah,
so
okay.
there's such device
Yeah.
that I carry. Okay, thank you very much, Mark, for your advice. I
Yeah, no
hope
problem.
this interview is helpful for you in planning and preparing your motorcycle or scooter for a long trip. So let me know if you have any other questions. Drop it in the comments below. I'll try to answer them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For sake, the aeroplane.